Within the building trade itself, it was the old buildings that interested me most, and I had no real inclination to get involved with new build practices. Working with stone, it's very much a matter of cladding metal buildings, concrete buildings with a skin of stone, whereas buildings like this old thing are kind of 8 foot thick at the bottom. There's tens of thousands of tons of material in an old building like that, and that's the type of buildings that I like. My name's Gardner Malloy, and I'm a stonemason from East Lothian. I live in Cockenzie, and the tower here is right in my backyard. The condition of the building was brought to the attention of the council, I think around about the year 2000, and the upper reaches were in really poor condition. There was literally no mortar left in a lot of the joints. There was one or two tears that had worked their way through the fabric of the building, and the whole upper reaches were in really perilous condition. You could have pushed the whole thing over at that point in time, and inevitably it would have collapsed. There was one or two places where it was just beginning to go. I think I did 2 6-month sessions, myself and a mortar worker here, and we put away about 7 tons of lime mortar, packed carefully into the wall. Nobody ever moved stone far, ever. You know, it's not until the age of the railways do you get stone from one part of the country appearing built in another part, which is partly what gives your local idioms, your local idiosyncrasies in the building, because of the stone and the materials that were immediately available to hand. Stone is massively heavy material, so nobody ever moved it a very long way at all. We're lucky here, we're right in the Carboniferous sandstone seam associated with the Lothian coal basin. That grey stone there, although it's really soft, it's actually really durable, as you can see. It's lasted really well. The orangey stone's kind of coming for the beach more, and again some of that's really tough for sandstone. Some of the redder stone, a little bit softer. Limestone is burnt in a lime kiln to give you quicklime, which is your basic raw material, with a 3,000-year pedigree of construction with stone. You know, the biggest piece of aggregate in your lime mortar is the biggest grain in your coarse sand. So it's like a miniature concrete, and it's only really effective, rule of thumb, about the size of your thumb. If you've got a bit of lime mortar bigger than your thumb, it will not endure because there's no compaction on it. It's almost impossible to compact it. So the best thing you can do with either like stone pinning or oyster shells is a nice way of doing it. Prior to repointing commencing, I'll go through as I'm tidying up and take out all the little bits of stone. So if it's too small for a piece of stone, bish bash bosh, you knock in an oyster shell, goes right in deep, compacts the lime mortar around it, which allows it to stay there for long enough for it to carbonate properly. And also, interestingly enough, the material of the oyster shell is itself calcium carbonate, CaCO3, so it also acts as like a kind of like a seed crystal. It starts a place for the carbonation process to happen around about the oyster shell, so you're getting like multiple benefits with knocking oyster shells in it. And I'm not the first guy to do it. You'll see in any of those big wide joints lots and lots of oyster shells like this. They've been in there probably since it was built. They used to, those guys built that used to eat oysters for their lunch, because it wasn't really posh food in those days. It was free food. You could rummage it off the beach and eat it. So, you know, it's like crisp packets and juice cans nowadays on a building site, bloody everywhere, so they used to knock them into the wall. So there's always an old guy who knows how to do it easily and effectively, and then there's always a smart youngster who's got a better idea, introduces a new and improved technique, or the guys been working on the boats with ropes and blocks and tackle and all of that push, shove, lever technology. It's all good stuff and sadly missing, and we've got the ability to do absolutely anything now with cranes and lifts and shifts, and nothing's impossible, and yet, we really don't achieve anything like what these old boys did at all. We put up 10 sheds. Give yourself a wee clap in the back because they're a novel shape this time. Bah! I mean, it's very speculative, but you can clearly see there's been some kind of structure going up to the front door. But it's clearly had a platform at the bottom of the doorway and a roof of some kind above it, and it probably wrapped right round the corner a wee bit. So, there would have been a kind of outdoor lobby, a porch almost to the building at height there, and that would have been a method of controlling access. It would be magnificent. It would be fantastic to restore it. The view, I loved the view. I loved working up there. I loved the feel of the aspect of the garden around about us, and the feeling of I actually felt really quite proprietorial towards it. I felt right at home. I had a wee seat in the grand hall and my generator, and I'd make a nice cup of tea at peacetime, and I just felt perfect working here. Enjoyed it. When I was working here, there was a lot of people would come in and talk to us, and we had access. Some people were more interested in climbing up through the building and seeing the top, and a lot of the old guys talked about playing up in here when they were kids, and climbing all over even the upper reaches as children. So yeah, it's part of the Pans. It's part of the fabric of the village. It's part of the material of everybody's lives, one way or another. I do think that's important, because without getting up close and personal, it's not in your mind. You've no sense of this building really from the outside. You do actually need to get in it and up within it to have a feel for how it sits within the village and how the village actually clusters around it as well. That's quite an interesting feeling for the top there. The kind of this is one of the sort of core seed crystals of the development in the village. I read an old Victorian book, Preston Pans and Vicinity, which had an etching, a picture of a couple of stonemasons working on it round about 1890, and they were hanging out of one of those windows right up at the top there, two of them sitting side by side on a bosun's chair, literally with no safety protection whatsoever, working away on the wall, pointing it, and it was high summer, which is not the best time to point, by the way, because your stuff will dry out too quick, and those guys didn't have the advantage of a pump-up backpack full of water to keep everything moist. So they had rhubarb leaves on their heads, and it was a charming little engraving, copperplate in the book, and that, interestingly, was a programme of works which was done in about 1890, and one of the Preston Pans residents got up a fundraising drive within the village themselves, and Fowler, the brewery, the brewer, put in £25, and someone else, a couple of the shopkeepers, the village of Preston Pans, put the money into themselves to employ a couple of guys. And 130 years ago, to do the previous restoration programme on this building, as far as we can tell. One of the old engineers that worked for the council when I was here in 2000 remembered in the 50s serious discussions about blowing it up, about demolishing it with dynamite just to clear it away. And you know, that's the difference between how people felt about old buildings 130 years ago, 60 years ago, and now. You know, things change. People feel differently about heritage. Luckily, they never blew it up. Here we are.